This is KossTalk with Evan Kossman, and you are listening to episode 5. This week on the podcast, we had Blair Rose. He is the managing partner of Rose and Rose, a law firm specializing in mortgage financing. I found it very important to get a lawyer on the podcast as a way to contrast with Adam Wilson's story from episode 3. I found it interesting to see the contrast between the work students like Adam have to go through in the present to get to where Blair is in the future. So without holding you back any further, let's enjoy the episode. So I'm here with Blair Rose, partner of Rose and Rose, and let's start at the beginning of your law journey. What do you remember about law school?
Well, what I remember was, first of all, I got accepted, I think, the second day after law school started, so I had to make a mad dash from Toronto to Windsor and get enrolled and get all my books. And what I initially remember about law school was the amount of reading that was required was incredible. I think the first night we had about 150 pages of legal size tiny print to read, and I knew I was in for a challenge.
So you weren't even enrolled the first day of school, you were let in afterwards. That must have been crazy.
Well, I mean, it was typically they had waiting lists in those days because the acceptance procedure was a little different than it was now, and I guess people may have accepted at multiple schools and hadn't told each school exactly where they were going. It was before computers, so. I did get a call, and I was thrilled because I'd only completed 2 years of university at that point. I didn't have my degree. I had done very well on the LSAT admission test, and I was happy to go.
So were you enrolled in your original university and you basically had to drop out to go to law
Well, no,
school?
I got a call because law school started, I believe, prior to the BA program starting. So I hadn't started third year at that point.
So when I talked with Adam Wilson a couple weeks ago, he just finished his first year. He was surprised by how competitive the program was. Well, what do you remember about the competition, and is it different now than today?
Well, I think it was it was pretty competitive. Ours was a total class of 180 people that was broken into 3 sections of 60, and I would say probably 95% of the people who were there were pretty competitive in nature, and some were ruthlessly competitive. It just in terms of, the classic stories you hear that the 2 copies of a certain book or article you needed would always seem to be signed out at the library, or certain people would certainly attempt to monopolize professors' times at the end of each lecture, and it was a little difficult to find out all the information you really needed. But in spite of that, I guess also because I was going to Windsor and I was out of town and there wasn't much else to do but go to the library every night. So typically I was probably in the library from 6:30 to 11:30 every night when it closed. So, part of it was socializing with other guys, but you put in a lot of hours, that's for sure.
Oh, for sure. Were there any examples of things like false notes being passed around? Did you hear of any of those type of horror stories, or not really?
Not really. As a matter of fact, I think there was... When I was in first year, there was a fellow in third year who had kept copious and meticulous notes. He had the nickname the Golden Hand.
Ah, yes.
And a lot of his notes were passed down. So that was a good starting point. And there was other people who would make notes and case studies and freely pass them around. So even though it was competitive, there was a certain degree of camaraderie that I think rose above the competitive nature of most of the people. And we had study groups. People would actually try to help out each other.
That's good. That's the opposite of what you hear basically today.
Well, you know what, that may be the case. It probably is somewhat more competitive today. I don't really have any direct knowledge about what goes on in law school, other than the fact that I know the course selection has obviously changed dramatically as technology has come to the forefront, and health sciences, and just women's rights, civil rights, all these different areas of practice that didn't exist. Nobody had even heard of in 1975.
Makes sense. So when did you know going into law was for you?
I actually didn't. I thought I would end up as a history professor, but I always had the thought. My dad was a lawyer. I had the thought of going into law. I didn't. You know what? I really wasn't sure what it was, but I thought it would give me some independence as being a professional, and gave me the option to either work in a large organization, in a firm, or do my own thing. So I think that was really the motivating factor. Was you could be a professional yet entrepreneurial.
So you mentioned that your father was a lawyer. Did you know going into law school that you had a potential avenue to join him in his practice?
I did. It wasn't my first choice, even though that's what ended up happening. I had thought that maybe I would pursue more of a litigation career. I articled for a firm that did exclusively litigation, and I was initially going to set up a practice with my roommate from law school, and sort of at the last minute, some different things came up at both ends, and I opted to join my dad instead.
Were you comfortable with that decision at the time, or were you still hesitant even when you signed up, essentially?
No, I was confident. He had a part of his practice that interested me. He was primarily had a general practice that had the main focus was real estate, and that's pretty much what I was interested in, and I've developed the practice into a different area, but still connected to real estate.
So what is your specialty?
Well, my specialty is mortgage financing and mortgage enforcement. We have a very high volume practice of doing mortgage transactions, private, institutional, and then everything that leads from that, collection, enforcement, that sort of thing.
How did you determine that avenue was the right avenue to go down?
Well, I guess it was one of my initial clients was a fairly large finance company who did primarily mortgages, and I was doing their legal work for several years, and I got a taste of what mortgage financing was all about, and I decided that was certainly an interesting and lucrative avenue to take.
How did you adapt your father's practice to meet what you were changing into?
Well, I adapted it in the sense that he had done some mortgage lending himself and with other clients who I developed further and brought in new people and created a pretty broad network of mortgage brokers that brought work to us. So it developed. It did exist at the time. It wasn't my main focus. I was doing initially a little bit more litigation, but I saw the opportunities for the mortgage finance end of it.
Did coming into the practice come easily, or did you find yourself you had to adapt to it?
I think it came fairly easily. I've always been interested in real estate, and mortgages are obviously a part of real estate, and the administrative part of a practice is something that, and the business part, that's nothing they can teach you at law school. Just running a business, dealing with employees and all the issues that go with that, and managing the number of files is sometimes a challenge, but obviously as things have changed and computers came in and software and those developments, it's made things a lot easier to manage a high volume of transactions on a monthly basis.
What do you wish that you know now that you didn't know then?
Well, it's still the things I had to learn are still a challenge. You still have administrative challenges and staffing challenges. In terms of, I guess, just the longer you do something, you obviously have much more knowledge about what you're doing. You acquire certain skills in how to deal with people and how to negotiate transactions and how to finalize transactions. And I don't know if it's something that I know now that I didn't know then. It's just something that you grow into.
Interesting. Catching up to today, you are the boss of your own practice. What perks come with that?
Well, I think that the main perk is really a sense of independence, that I can develop my business and practice as I see. I've considered partnerships at various times. I've had associations. Some worked, some didn't work. I kind of like the ability to plan my own course. It's not really a question of accountability to others, but just everybody has a different vision of which way they want to see a business grow, and I've been happy with how mine has grown. At different times, I think maybe I would like to have a little extra help. It certainly makes being away from the office easier, and knowing that it's in good hands. But again, just the independence factor, I think, is for me is the main consideration, and it allows you to pursue a growth path that I'm comfortable with, without having to entertain influences from other parties and who may have their own agendas. I find it when you run your own business, one of the other perks is you do get to meet the principals of other businesses and operations, and that's always interesting, in getting their view on what they're doing to grow their own businesses, and trying to apply that to my own situation as it's applicable. So as far as perks, listen, and you're your own boss. If you don't want to come in one day, or you want to take an extended holiday, or you need to get away, you do it. And as long as you have good people in place to keep everything running, and who are competent and can make decisions that would be similar to the decisions you would make, I think it can still run smoothly.
So speaking about those people who can help out and allow you to take the time off, what do you look for in prospective employees?
Well, I look for people who are dedicated, who are, I work long hours. I'm probably here 65 hours a week, even after, as long as I've been working. So, I look for people who are prepared to work hard, who have a good knowledge, who are thorough in what they do, and who have a sense of we're in a service industry, so servicing your clients is very important, and getting back to them, addressing the issues that they have, and dealing with them in a timely fashion is important.
So, speaking of the clients, who would be your typical client and what do you look for with prospective clients?
Well, I mean, I have a variety of, I can't say that there's a typical client. I mean, I have different aspects of my business. Some clients are mortgage brokers who send us work to do closings on their own mortgage transactions. I mean, what I look for in them is, again, people who are thorough, people who know their own file, know their own clients, have sent us, have done all their due diligence and have sent us all the information we need to then handle their file in an efficient manner. Then I've got other clients who, like I mentioned, I do a large mortgage practice. It's primarily private mortgages. So, I have a lot of people who have money invested in mortgages through me, and I'm looking for business like-minded people. I mean, any form of investment has risk and reward to it, and people have to be cognizant of it. Every investment has certain risk, and people have to appreciate what those risks might be, and just sort of be reasonable in their expectations.
So can you speak on to what risks people might see with this business?
Well, I mean, the mortgage business is to a large degree tied to the real estate market. So, and we've enjoyed the benefit of a very long run of increasing real estate values, which, can potentially change at any time. So people who do invest in mortgages should be aware of the general state of the economy, the general state of the real estate market, and and gauge their investing accordingly.
Do you remember any advice you were given along the way as you started your practice in law school, really anywhere?
I can't say that I remember any specific advice other than I mean, in law school, I mean, we were definitely taught to be very diligent, like to look at issues from as many potential angles as you could. I mean, the typical law school exam wanted you to argue both sides of any case. So, I mean, that's great advice in the sense that, whatever you think of your position or situation, there's always or typically an opposing party that has a diametrically opposed view to yours, and probably facts that substantiate their position as well. So, I mean, just that sort of thinking where you don't look at something just at its face value, that you try and look as deep and as hard behind the set of facts that you're presented with, to try and foresee what the pitfalls of any transaction may be.
Do you have any advice for any prospective lawyers or anyone in law school considering the law profession?
Well, again, I mean, I've certainly enjoyed it. It has its challenges, it has its aggravations, but it's certainly a career worth pursuing. Again, my perspective, I suppose, is extremely limited in that I have a very specific type of practice. I don't have a general practice by any means. I have been involved in cases that have been litigated, primarily by retaining counsel to act for us, and I know that those situations are definitely very protracted at times and can be frustrating, and the legal system maybe isn't as fluid as people would like it to be. But in terms of a career, I mean, there are so many opportunities that a law career can give you that I think anybody who's interested can find some area or facet that that appeals to them, that serve them well.
So that's great advice. So to end every podcast, I like to have my guests ask a question for the next guest. So your question comes from my last guest, David Tardik. Would you rather fill a hole or dig a hole?
I guess the answer is I look at myself as a problem solver. So I think, and I'm always looking for, part of my business is, call it creative financing. I'm constantly trying to help people out of a situation they've gotten themselves into. So probably they've dug the hole and I'm the one that often has to fill it. So I think I'm definitely I'm a filler as opposed to a digger.
Great answer. And so do you have a question for our next guest?
Yeah, I think my question would be, do you currently enjoy what you're doing, and if you don't, what are you doing about it?
Great question. All right. Thank you, Blair, for being on the podcast, and thank you, listeners, for listening. Just some quick follow-up notes. We are taking a week off. If you like the content, if you could be so kind to rate and subscribe, you can find the podcast anywhere podcasts can be found. If you want to connect with us, we are on Facebook and Twitter under the username KossTalk. Other than that, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.